episode of the Grind Hours podcast, a college football episode of the Grind Hours podcast. I've got the Hall of Famer on the line. I am back in
Hola.
Long Island. He is still in Middletown, I assume in his apartment.
That's correct.
Um, we're day quarantine number 8006 with no clear end in sight. And that's kind of why I want to talk college football at the end of July.
Mhm.
The last chance you last season of college football is going up the day that this is being released. It will be up when this podcast is up. So you can watch it after you listen to the pod or before you listen to the pod, depending on your sleep schedule. Nick, this is one of our favorite series, and a series that if you've been following us for a while, we reference it multiple times throughout the lineage of this podcast. But it's
Mhm.
coming to an end. They are doing one final season of college football before they're transitioning to basketball. And as a filmmaker yourself, I want to talk to you about why this series to you is so great.
I mean, I just love, I'm a big fan of documentaries in general and sports documentaries in particular. And I think we were talking about a little before the podcast. This show has probably done more for sports documentary making in over the past, however many years than really anything else. I mean, it's always the tone is always perfect. You get to see into these players' lives and into the way they go about their day and into the way the programs go about trying to help them and give them the second chances that these kids need. And it's beautiful. It has everything you want in a sports documentary. It has the human element from these players who are getting another shot at their dream. It has the sports element. It shows you the games. It shows you the huddles. It shows you the wins and the losses and the practices and everything in between. And it's just a really well put together thing. Whoever directs them, I'm not sure offhand who directs a lot of the episodes, but whoever does them, they do a great job. I've always been very impressed at how these episodes are put together, how these seasons are put together, the way they follow these overarching storylines of certain players. And it's just a beautiful thing to watch year in and year out.
Do you think that that's something specific to college football, or do you think that they can make the transition to basketball? Because that's one thing that I think you always talk about is your love for college football because it truly is about the people, and it's nothing like that in any other sport really other than college football.
Mm-hmm.
So, do you think that that transition is palpable for this franchise?
I think it's easier with to go to another college sport than it is to go to like a professional sport. Like, I think the closest professional sport comparison we could have to this is probably like Hard Knocks.
Right.
But like Hard Knocks is following around, you know, it's a similar thing in that it's showing the lives of the players, it's showing the lives of the coaches, it's showing the lives of the team on a day in basis. And Hard Knocks is very interesting. Don't get me wrong, I like Hard Knocks a lot too. But I think
Rhode Island's offensive line coach, Coach Gut.
I think it's part of the beauty, at least for me, of Last Chance U, is that it's in the name, Last Chance. It's a lot of these guys, it's their one shot. They've had something go wrong at their previous college stop. Maybe they couldn't get their grades up. Maybe they were involved in some kind of some kind of criminal thing, and they're trying to reinvent themselves after that. And it's the beauty of it is seeing these guys get the second chance and take advantage of it and say, I'm gonna be a better person, and I'm gonna take the steps, and I'm gonna make my dream a reality.
I think what makes this series great for me is growing up in that sort of you're either really really smart or it's sports, and that's your only way out of this town.
Yeah.
And you and I have talked about that for years. Whether we're in high school or post high school, it's the middle town mentality, and it's the small town mentality for a ton of towns in this country that really gets highlighted with this type of filmmaking. Is you're like, I know that guy because I've met that type of guy before, and
Hmm.
you root for him, and you're like, please don't fall down like the 10 people that I know that have fallen down the same route that you're going through. And the humility to it, you're right, the human element that the 30 for 30 can't grasp, or
Hmm.
any of the HBO documentaries that are coming out right now that are fantastic can't grasp, is the what's it actually like for a college level guy who's just on the cusp of making the NFL. He has the talent to do it, but the system, in a sense, has let him fall down. And one thing that I would love to see that we're not going to be able to see because they're ending the series is what a 2020 last chance you would look like,
Oh yeah.
or a 2021 college football season would look like post the pandemic, the Black Lives Matter movement, how that's going to progress through the year, and just how they would go about showing that. Because I do think you're going to get some of that in this documentary. I don't know. I really think that will shine through, but that would be interesting to me, and I would love to see something like that.
Yeah, that'd be really cool too. And I think we'll probably get a little element of that with the basketball stuff.
But let's take a quick break. We'll hear from Feed Hudson Valley, and we'll be right back.
Feed Hudson Valley is a regional food rescue and harvesting network in the Hudson Valley operating through Dutchess, Orange, Ulster, Columbia, Greene, Putnam, and Sullivan counties. It links donors of prepared but unserved food and fresh produce with nonprofits and food assistant programs through an app assisted network of food donors, volunteers, and feeding agencies. Feed Hudson Valley facilitates the harvesting, processing, and distribution of locally grown or produced agricultural products, self-stable food donations, and prepared nutritious foods. The app used is called Chow Match, and it is easy for volunteers to download and use. Among the donors are restaurants, farms, food makers, stores, hospitals, and universities. The food assistant programs include food pantries, soup kitchens, and shelters. Volunteers are matched through the Chow Match app when a donation is available. They can indicate that they are available to make a run and then pick it up for a donor and deliver it to the agency. The Feed Hudson Valley Network currently includes over 300 volunteers, 130 donors, and 95 receiving agencies. Last year, on average, Feed Hudson Valley rescued and redirected over 12,000 pounds of food each month. Feed Hudson Valley could use more donors and volunteers. To learn more and sign up, visit feedhv.org. Again, that's feedhv.org. One more time, spelled out, feedhv.org. Now back to the podcast.
All right, in the first block, Nick and I talked about one of our favorite TV shows, and I honestly, I think it's a little wrong to call it a TV show. It's an 8-part movie, really.
Yeah,
And
definitely.
I mean, it's 8 hours long. Every episode is about an hour long, but it's an 8-hour movie, and you love every single minute of it. And I can't wait to see what they do with the last season of college football and the first season of college basketball. But let's switch back to college football as a whole. As of
Okay.
right now, the day that we're recording this, July 27th, 2020, there is still no concrete plan for college football, and it seems like college football and college basketball will not happen in 2020. And if it does, it'll happen in the spring of 2021 in a shortened conference style season, spring
Hmm.
football, which will be weird. It will be weird. But
Yeah.
do you think going forward that the NCAA will host any sort of sport, and in particular college football, because that's the real breadwinner for the NCAA in 2020?
I think it's about. I waver on this like on a week-to-week basis, on a day-to-day basis, because it all depends on what information we have about how will people be safe, how will people be protected from getting sick, how will we be able to make sure that the kids have a relatively normal experience, with going to class and going to practice and all these things, and how to make it safe for everybody. Right now, I think it's about 60-40. At least for me personally, what I've seen, I think it's 60% likely we will, 40% we won't. So it's almost half and half. And the only reason I'm giving an edge to we will see it before the end of the year is because, again, it does make so much money. It is so important to a lot of these schools and to a lot of these towns, like places like Clemson, South Carolina, where the school is the business for that town. And
Right.
And they need to have the money coming in from the football team, or like Happy Valley in Pennsylvania, which is our local college football team, Penn State, or Syracuse, so
I would think we're more
I think
Syracuse because we're New York based, even though we both know people that either live near State College or have went to State College at Penn State.
fair. I wonder what is actually geographically closer to us, if it's Syracuse or Happy Valley.
You know
But
what?
anyway,
I think it actually might be Happy Valley, so you might be right. It might be our local.
Well, I guess
football team.
technically our local one is Rutgers, but Rutgers doesn't count.
Who gives a fuck about Rutgers?
But anyway, so here nor there. I think 60% of me says we will have a season, 40% says we won't. And if we do have a season, definitely in the fall, it's going to be conference only, because that's basically what everybody has said. And probably in the spring as well, it'll be either conference only, or if they are doing out-of-conference games, if they are preserving out-of-conference games, it'll be marquee matchups like Alabama, USC, and stuff like that.
Do you think, and this is presuming that we have a college football season, I'm erring on the side of everything's just going to not happen this year, and we're going to have to reevaluate and maybe do some spring ball, or just wait until the fall and do a 2021 college football season. But if they do actually have a season and have it where it's conference only, do you think you can judge it to who's the cream of the crop, who's the best of the best, go create a playoff style, and then in the spring have your college football playoff of your 4 teams in a centralized location of a bubble and have a national champion?
I think that would be a good solution, because like the conferences individually seem like it seems like, from what I understand, that each conference, all the schools in that conference are on the same page with each other about how to test. Like, for example, Penn State, Ohio State, Michigan are all on the same page about how to go about their seasons, but Ohio State and Alabama are not necessarily on the same page. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So I think that would be a reasonable solution, but again, without the out of conference games, without those extra data points, it's going to be hard to judge who's worthy and who's not. Especially since, like, I mean, if basically, like, imagine like if Alabama, because Alabama and imagine Alabama runs the table and Georgia runs the table and Florida can't run the table because Florida plays Georgia. But imagine Alabama and Georgia run the table, Ohio State and Wisconsin run the table, because we know that the SEC and the Big Ten are by far the 2 best conferences right now. So
Correct.
Imagine both of those division winners run the table, and everybody else has at least 1 conference loss. Do you then take the undefeated teams from 2 conferences and put them in? It's weird. It makes it even more squirrely to me to have,
what you can do is, and the way that you can have your conference title games is the same way that you could have your college football playoff. Put it in a bubble. have the teams quarantine for 2 weeks, play the game in the bubble. Make
Mm-hmm.
sure that there are no positive tests before the games start. Play the games, have the conference champions, and judge off of the conference champions who's the cream of the crop, just like you would do it any other year. You're not going to have your top 25. You're not going to have your countdown shows, but
Mm-hmm.
it's still something that is relatively normal and is a pandemic solution to the problem. Whether or not that is actually going to happen, I would say it's probably, in my opinion, 80% not going to happen, but 20% it will. And I think the 20% of it happening is worth talking about because of what's going on in pro sports right now with Major League Baseball and the NBA and the talks of what's going to happen with the NFL. I think
Mm-hmm.
talking about this and giving people hope right now is something that is extremely valuable because especially what you saw this past weekend with Major League Baseball and how it really truly took everyone's mind off of what's going on right now while also constantly reminding us of what the hell is going on in the world right now. So this is worth talking about. And I think that of all the sports that could possibly find a solution, football, college football is the only college sport that I think could possibly work like this. Yes, could you
Mm-hmm.
have an NCAA tournament like this? Yeah, but you couldn't have a season like this for basketball, at least for me.
Right, because they're playing multiple games per week. Football, it's one game a week.
Right.
It's much easier to sort of self-isolate until then. It's much easier to you disinfect the room right. You could spend a whole week disinfecting the locker rooms.
Right.
So yeah, I definitely agree with you that football is kind of an easy one to manage because of the
Even
amount of
though
games.
like even though football in itself, you're touching everybody on every single play,
Mm-hmm.
you can still
If you're touching everybody but no one is sick, then it doesn't matter.
right.
And one easy solution that I think is probably going to happen one way or another is that they'll just say, look, there's no midweek games this year. Everybody either plays Friday night or Saturday.
No, I think everyone plays Saturday. No Friday night games. Everybody plays Saturday. Everybody.
I think that'd be completely valid.
All right, let's take one more quick break and we'll come back with Phil Steele's college football preview.
Yes, and also Nick Parody's college football preview.
We'll be right back. All right, Nick. I'm going to give you the time and the platform to give me and the listeners the best of your favorite magazine probably ever.
Yeah.
Phil Steele's college football preview. You dissect that like it's Nostradamus.
I mean, because he really is kind of the football Nostradamus. You know, he's got a great track record for picking the football season, and every year I just love to dive into this magazine. Again, Phil Steele's college football. This is not an ad. He's not sponsoring me. I just love the man's work, and I think more people should know about him, especially if you're a real sports fans like us. And the magazine, as you can predict, this year is as good as ever. It's straight to the point on every page. There's tons of information. There's tons of stuff you can use to go about dissecting the season. And some of his big stuff this year, he's picking Ohio State to win the championship.
I don't like that, just on Homer reasons.
I figured you wouldn't. He's picking Ohio State, Alabama, Oklahoma, Clemson as the Final Four. So, you know, pretty standard to what we've been seeing over the last few years. And his number one surprise team is Texas A&M.
Wow, the Aggies making a return.
Yeah, and it's a very interesting reasoning he's giving behind it. So Texas A&M has a ton. Texas A&M had a ton of injuries last year, but they didn't lose a lot of people to the NFL. So that means there's lots of people in the depth chart coming back with starting experience. They have Kellen Mond, who's their senior quarterback. He's been at it for 3 years at this point down there. He knows the offense inside and out. They've got Jimbo Fisher as coach, of course, who won a national title at Florida State. And they have an interesting schedule where they end the season playing Alabama and LSU in back-to-back weeks. So
That's murderer's row.
That is murderer's row, but they could legitimately be going into that 10-0. And this could be like a Minnesota situation last year where they're like the Cinderella team that nobody saw starting out that hot. They get on a roll. Who knows what could happen? I mean, Kellen Mond has a lot more.
You can go 10-0, and then you could end the season 10-2 and get steamrolled by two of the best programs in the country.
You could, but I think at best they'll end 11-1 because without Joe Burrow and the miraculous season, I think LSU will be taking a bit of a step back this season.
LSU is still great. That program is still great. They had one of the best recruiting classes of the year last year.
100%. But
they're still going to be there. They might not be the national champion LSU Tigers, but they're going to be a top 10 team. So
I have no doubt about that. They'll be a tough out, but I think Texas A&M might have something for them. But my surprise team, my national title pick is Ohio State and Clemson. I think we get a rematch of that interesting epic bowl game from this past year, and I think we get to see the two best quarterback prospects in the game, Justin Fields and Trevor Lawrence, go head to head. But my surprise team is Miami, actually.
The U.
I think the U is going to...
Well, if they have anybody to play because of what's
true.
going down in Miami right now.
That's fair. But I think if they do get to play, whether it's spring or fall, the U is going to be back in a big way this year. So there's a lot of interesting things going on down there. Number one, they got a really great recruiting class this year, kind of a sneaky good class. A lot of guys who weren't the most highly rated prospects, but there's a lot of 4 stars. There's a lot of talent. They have De'Aaron King coming in, the transfer from Houston. He was an absolute beast at quarterback for the Houston Cougars. He's coming in as a grad transfer to Miami. I think he's going to be real solid there. It's a good fit for him offensively. And they have a similar situation to Texas A&M, where they had a lot of injuries last year, but they didn't lose that many guys to graduation or to the NFL. So there's a lot of guys coming back on the 2 deep that have starting experience and have knowledge of the scheme. And because it's the ACC, Miami is going to be able to pretty much run the table in their division. I don't see anybody putting up that big of a fight, from Virginia Tech to Virginia and Georgia Tech and Pittsburgh. I think Miami will have an easy time beating all of those teams. And they should probably go into the ACC title if they make it that far against Clemson. And they could be undefeated at that point. So we would have like a Titan matchup between probably undefeated Clemson and probably undefeated Miami.
I think of all the things that's a sure thing is Trevor Lawrence making the national title game. He's going to have one of those runs that you never see. And he's been the spotlight his entire college career because of how special he is. But he's going to have one of those Cam Newton, Joe Burrow type of years where it's just like, I don't care who stands in front of me. I'm taking the Heisman. I'm taking the national championship. And I'm getting the number 1 overall pick. That's me. Yeah. That's who I am. And that's what I'm going to do this year. I think that's what's going to happen. Honestly, I think that's what's going to happen. And as much as I want Michigan to do well this year, and I think we are going to do well, and we are going to finally beat Ohio State in Jim Harbaugh's tenure, I think that's how good our squad is this year. I'm sorry it wasn't with Shea Pat, but, some things just can't happen in this world.
Mm-hmm. Well, you got Dylan McCaffrey now. He's going to be all right.
That's a great bloodline to have. The McCaffrey bloodline is fantastic. So I'm all behind Dylan McCaffrey. I know Ohio State's going to be a tough out. They are always a tough out. They are as strong as ever coming into this year. and they have a chip on their shoulder because they still think they got hosed on a call in the college football playoff last year when they kind of did. But nothing is stopping Trevor Lawrence this year. If there's a season, nothing is stopping him. I don't care who stands in his way, whether it's Alabama again, Ohio State, a surprise Texas A&M, Oregon, or somebody from the Pac-12, or Michigan or Ohio State. Nobody.
Yeah. Trevor is my Heisman pick as well. I think he's going to have – I mean, it's his junior year. He's going to the NFL. He has all the incentive in the world to ball out and show why he is the most hyped quarterback prospect since Andrew Luck. And if Clemson is on your schedule this year, like, I'm sorry, dude.
Yeah, I am.
I'm really sorry because it's not going to be pretty.
All right, before we get out of here, I want your best college football name, kind of like the East-West Bowl of Key and Peele used to do. What's your best college football name?
There's a lot of good ones this year. My two personal favorites are Bumper Pool from Arkansas.
Okay.
And I have to check where this guy is going to school at because I don't quite remember, but he's a freshman coming in this year. His name is L.V. Bunkley Shelton.
All right.
L.V. Bunkley Shelton. He's going to play at Arizona State with Herm Edwards. And can you guess what the L.V. stands for?
Louis Vuitton.
Louis Vuitton. His name is Louis Vuitton Bunkley Shelton. Isn't that great?
Oh my God, that's the winner. That is most definitely the winner. Oh my God. All right, geez, man. Oh my God.
Isn't that great?
That's fantastic. I think that's my favorite name ever. That is donned a college football jersey. I think I might have to get his Arizona State jersey just to say I have a Louis Vuitton shirt in my closet. But on that note, Nick, it's a great place to end. The ending of this podcast was kind of like our NBA roast, which is going to be delayed. I can't believe that I didn't think about our favorite podcast of the year until just now, when it was almost a month past the time that we would probably do it. But
yeah, it'll be coming in October.
It'll come in October. It's a little delayed, the NBA roast this year.
Speaking of delays, here's an interesting thought that I just had.
Okay.
If the college football season is postponed to the spring, but the NFL season is not, does that mean we could have a situation where the draft is happening concurrently with part of the season?
That'd be interesting. And I think that'd kind of be like the college baseball playoff, where it's just like, yeah, this dude from Vandy, he was selected 3rd overall by the Braves. And he's going to go play with the Braves after this is done.
Yeah.
I think it'd be cool. But I also think if that happens, you have a lot of guys sitting out as well.
Yeah. I don't think people who get into the playoff would sit out, but definitely if we do have bowl games in some form, there'd be a lot of guys that are like, listen, I'm done.
I don't think there's going to be bowl games this year. I think it's just going to be the playoff. But
you're probably right.
That's a good place to end. We'll put a pin in it for another day. Nick, great having you on. I'll give you the platform to plug your stuff and do a movie review and all that.
All right. You can find me on all the social medias at Nick Parodies, Twitter, Instagram, all that good shit. You can find me on, you can find my co-host and me, Matt Dixon, on the Children's Programming Podcast.
I got to listen to the episode that you did with John.
Yeah,
I haven't listened to it yet.
The newest episode is out now. It's with our guests, Cousin John and Jamiel, who are both big NBA fans, and we talked about The Last Dance. We talked a little bit about the team formerly known as Washington Redskins, and all kinds of stuff like that. We're working on the RST doc. We're figuring out how to proceed with it during this difficult time, during this complicated time in our lives, which is the quarantine, and we're going to figure it out, and we're going to get the content to you somehow. And then as far as movie reviews go, I was actually delaying this episode a little bit because I was finishing a great one. It's called Repo Man. There's a lot to process here, so I'm not going to give a comprehensive review because I'm still figuring out what the fuck it all meant in my head. But just know that Repo Man is really awesome. It stars Harry Dean Stanton and Emilio Estevez, Emilio's first big part.
Huh.
It's an indie film from 1984 in Los Angeles. A guy named Alex Cox made it. He would later go on to help write the script for Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. So that gives you an idea of kind of the tone we're looking at. And it's basically about this LA punk, this street punk, who played by Emilio Estevez, who joins this Repo Man agency. And he's taking in cars for money. Right. And he gets, one of their assignments is to take in this Chevy Malibu, which we find out is connected to aliens.
All right.
And it's great. It's got a really cool 80s punk soundtrack, like Black Flag and Circle Jerks are on the soundtrack. The bassist of Circle Jerks actually plays a small role in the movie, which is kind of funny.
Because why not?
Because why not, exactly. And it's just really interesting film. You can actually get it at Barnes & Noble right now because they're doing the Criterion sale. That's how I got it.
Awesome. On this side of the coin, jdatasports.blogspot.com. If you haven't noticed, I've been putting out Yankee reviews. Behind the Pinstripe is finally back, or in between the Pinstripes is finally back, for the 2020 pandemic-shortened season. No one tonight, but there's going to be something in its place because of the cancellation of the game in Philadelphia. This podcast, of course, if you've reached this point, please like, subscribe, share with anybody who you see fit, download the podcast. And until next time, closing time. You don't have to go home, but you can't stay here.